Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today I just wanted to catch up with a couple of short version book reviews of some books that I have read or that have been read here on the channel. And I haven't done a full review for them because a little bit earlier this year I was like, I don't want to make every review my in-depth style of review because one, it takes a lot longer, and then two, I don't always have that much content. I don't always have that much to say about every book that I read, especially if I'm really enjoying the book. I'm not taking notes because I'm in the book. And so if I only do the super in-depth book reviews, then I'm typically going to be talking mostly about books that I didn't enjoy. And I think that that's a disservice to all of the books, whether I liked them or I didn't like them, because there are so many books that should just be shared. So I wanted to do a couple of videos every so often just to catch up on books that I've read that I haven't said anything about yet. So this list is going to be made up of mostly different books that we've read in the Loin Stream, which is the book club here on the channel. Every Friday we meet, we read some books together, we have a good time, and well, we suffer a lot together, but you know, you could join in the fun. So if you're wondering what kind of books we've read so far on the Loin Stream, I used to do full impact book reviews like normal with the Loin Stream, but I determined that I didn't want to do that. So for every book that we read on the Loin Stream, so instead I'm going to just be compiling them in one of these lists, and maybe, you know, every so often when I get a bunch of them together, then I can talk about them here. The other thing that this opens me up to is if I don't do an in-depth book review on every book that I read, it actually enables me to read more books, and it lets me get to more indie books, which is what I have a backlog of, because I don't want to write write-ups on every single book. I want to actually just be able to sink in and just have maybe a vibe check instead of a deep analysis. So we're going to do some of that today. The other reason that I wanted to do it this way is that I have books that other people have sent to me, or other people wanted me to read, like Lightbringer. That one I haven't been able to get to because I've been doing the ALA books for most of this year. And Poison City by Yigao-chan, and the second book in the Idon trilogy, which we're going to get to here, and the third book comes out next month. So I wanted to, I was hoping to have read more of H.H. Miller's books before now, but I have just been bogged down. So I have wanted to do more, you know, and now I've got a true crime book sitting on my desktop that I'm 60% of the way through, and I'm reading a wannabe, it's claimed Western. It's really a disappointment. I'm reading a disappointing book called Upstanding Women Wanted, that is claimed Western, but is about a caravan of librarians who are also lesbian anti-fascists. Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to just gatekeep modern Westerns, partially because Monty and I are writing a Western, and partially because this is not okay. But I just keep finding books that I'm like, I should read this just to talk about it, because sometimes you find a book that you need to talk about. Anyway, so let's get into these books. Not because you enjoy it, but because you want to be like, what are you doing? Before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lamoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story to that prompt, and on the first Monday of the month, we bask in the creativity of this community because you guys are brilliant. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, submit your first chapter and your cover to the link of the Fresh Meat feature. I will read them here on the channel, and hopefully that'll help more people find your work. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, you can get them at any of your favorite retailers. They're also linked down below, and you can get them at your library if you request them. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. The first book that I want to talk about today is Battle Games by Alex Ratcliffe. That was a book that was chosen for the Loin Stream. It was also a book that was submitted by the author to the Loin Stream. So if you are a brave enough soul to submit your own book to the Loin Stream to experience the heart-racing situation of having your book read live to a live studio audience and seeing immediate responses, The loin stream is the way. It happens. We've had it happen. Alex is a great guy. He's a regular on the channel, but he's also a great guy regardless of how regular he is. He is also the first and biggest major distributor of Tater Mash. So, I know, huge credentials up in here. So, what is Battle Games? If you think about like shonen sports anime, it's kind of like that. You're in this big sports games tournament arena thing where you form a team together, and then there are 3 games per tournament round. And so these are international teams, and you've got this very huge business going on. Now, the book starts out with the team captain of Anuna, Frank, being put out of commission because he takes in a leg injury during the first battle game. And this is where we then see the second in command, Harpy / Ashley, lead up into the main role. And she is not just a Harpy, but she is also, she cracks the whip is what I'm just gonna say about that. And so then you've got a new setup of team dynamics with this different person who is who pushes a lot harder, and I wouldn't say she's borderline abusive. I would just say that she is an abusive team captain. And since they're down a person, they have to bring in a new guy, which ends up being Gus. Now, through the story, you end up seeing a lot of different battle games. Again, it's very much like a shonen anime where you've got so many different tournament games going on, and Alex was very creative with these games. You also end up seeing some of the different character dramas going on where, you know, Harpy and Xander go way back into childhood. Frank is best friends with Harpy. You got how Gus fits in with being the new guy and being a guy that has a reputation but doesn't actually have like in-league experience. So there's that humbling going on. There's a level of hazing going on. And so then you have all of that happening. But if that sounds like something that you may enjoy, go for it. Just keep in mind that it is very much an action and adventure story more than anything else. I think the two things that really, some of the things that I remember standing out to me were that obviously I don't necessarily like when main characters are cheaters or cheating is involved in the plot, and that's a me thing totally. So nothing on the author or the story for having included those, but then I just have a hard time being like, oh, I'm supposed to cheer for these characters to have a happy ending or something when there's cheating going on. I can't. But that's a me thing. There, again, is a lot of action, a lot of time spent on battle games, and for me, that took away from allowing there to be more character interactions. There isn't a singular goal for the whole story. So instead of like, you know, having a story arc where characters are working towards something, the only story arc is working through to the finals, and then the end of the book is really whether or not they win at the finals. But there is no real like character arc or character-oriented goals in this that push the story forward. And so sometimes it can feel, again, more like an anime where you're kind of doing things. But if you just like a chill and sports anime, that is your place to go. The next book that I want to talk about is Model Land by Tyra Banks. Yes, we did read it. This is a book about a girl named Tookie De La Cream, who is a very special looking girl. And during the time of year when everybody is picking the people that will be sent off to Model Land to see if they can be the next top models of this universe, Tookie De La Cream is somehow picked by the magical number, and basically a version of Tyra Banks comes in and sweeps her into a sack with a couple other girls that are all kind of weird looking, and then take them off to Model Land, where they go through modeling school and trials and tribulations, and Tookie falls in love with a guy named Bravo, and she determines, you know, maybe she doesn't want to be here. And then they're looking at that one chick that was the Tyra Banks insert, who was also basically their captain, and she was going through her own things, which included sobbing over gravestones of her friends who died while she was self-whipping in front of the grave. And then you had like the Hall of Cats, where the failed models had all turned into cats and were attacking the other women that came in. And it was a trip. Oh my gosh. And there was the Model Land Eldritch Gods that like had a bunch of arms or a bunch of legs. Oh my gosh. It's all coming back to me now. I really enjoyed this book. Like, people will call it ridiculous, and it 100% is ridiculous, but it's all ridiculousness that makes sense. So I can't help but recommend it if you like weird and if you like monster, and it was just a lot of fun. One of the books that we read on the Loin stream earlier this year was Lightlark by Alex Astor. That was my second time reading that book, and I didn't want to do a long book review on it because there were plenty of video book reviews on it already at this point. And that is just about a girl named Isla. She is the heir to the Vanya's gonna kill me for this. The Grasslings. She comes from the grass/plant realm, okay? And the plot is such, like, it's a Swiss cheese martini is what it is. So these leaders of all of these basically elemental realms all get to take it to this castle because once in every so often, like 100 years or something, there's this tournament to see if they can solve the prophecy, and it's supposed to be a fight to the death, but it's not really a fight to the death because it's more like actually finding a sacrifice and trying to break the curse, because all of the different elemental realms are cursed in different ways, and they're trying to find out how to break the curse, who started the curse. And of course you've got Oro, which is Mr. King made of gold, and then you've got Grimshaw, who is the bad boy, emo boy. But the plot kind of just loses itself on what it's trying to do. We get to this tournament, but like everybody gets to choose what the tournament round is, and so then they do that for a little while, and there are like 2 or 3 balls during this, and there are cannibals. Oh, Cleo did nothing wrong, that's for sure. Hashtag justice for Cleo. Freaking Isla just hates her guts for no apparent reason the whole time through, and she just thinks everything bad that happens to her is Cleo's fault. Even like she stubs her toe, it's Cleo's fault. Girl, I know you want to hate on Cleo, but she done nothing wrong. The second book in that series comes out later this year. Oh, one of my biggest pet peeves with that book, oh my gosh. Isla was not only like a psychopath, which whatever, her breed, her certain type of people supposedly ate human hearts, and they were more animalistic and seen as animalistic people in the universe, so whatever. But every single time she had an issue with someone, she was like, I'm gonna freaking kill them. The whole way through, she was like, Oro did nothing but trust her, but give her decency and respect, and she's like, I want to kill this guy. She would get away with smacking people, with hurting people on purpose to punish them because she felt wronged. And if you know anything about me, one of my pet peeves is people that like do things like that in stories and then they get away with it because everybody is just like, oh, you're the main character, so we're not going to talk about how you abuse everybody. It's totally fine. It's just quirky. But being bloodthirsty and being cool with killing people is not, that's not what makes you a cool person. And this book has, when it's dealing with how Isla is, it kind of presents her as like this edgy, she's wearing these super nudie clothings, but she's super naive despite how her breed feeds off of seducing people. So she should be fairly adept to sexuality and how to manipulate sexuality, and like you could have done something with that where she wasn't aware, since it was just a byproduct of like her breed, but it didn't do anything like that. And then she's an absolute girl boss. There's this other thing, I think I mentioned it forever ago when I talked about Yakuza and like what makes somebody super cool. And so one of the trends that was in Lightlark and is in a lot of other books is people think that just killing people and killing people a lot and like not caring about it makes you super cool. It makes you a badass, but that's not how that works. It just makes you look like a psycho, and that's what Layla did from the Savior's Champion. We'll see that in Zenith with Andy, and you see that in a lot of stories where people think just having this complete apathy towards human life and being able to kill people and kill people in mass is the thing that is going to make you a super cool person. But it's lame, and it makes you a bad guy. And so you got that going on with Lightlark. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Night of the Mannequin by Stephen Graham Jones. And this was submitted by Ruth for the Loin stream, and we read it as one of the first books of this year. And I think she submitted it because she suffered and she wanted the rest of us to suffer. And it is about a guy who kind of has a mental breakdown one summer. Like all of his friends just either distance from him or something bad happens to them, and people start dying, and he starts seeing this mannequin all over the place, this Manny mannequin. It started with a prank of dressing up Manny the mannequin in the theater to get back at people. And then Manny just started showing up everywhere, and then Manny made Sydney go manic. And all I can say is that book was a disappointment with the way that it ended, for sure. You don't get any justice by the end of that book. It builds up into like a shootout at an outdoor movie theater, and the main character just like kills everybody, and then he gets in a boat, and then he just floats out into the middle of the lake looking up at the sky, and I think he thinks he sees a giant mannequin, and he's just like, this is the end. But so he basically gets away with everything that he did. It was not satisfying in the least. The next book to talk about is Memories in the City by Cliff Hamrick. And this is another book that was submitted by the author to the Loin Stream, and then we read it. It is about a man named Jake Fox, who is he lives sort of outside of the law, very reminiscent of Dishonored and Thief, if you've ever played those video games. There were some references during the Loin Stream. And he discovers a completely different secret society outside of where he lives, because he's told that you're not allowed to leave the city because it's so dangerous out there with like poison or what happened during the war. And then he goes through a tunnel and finds out that there is this whole other society out there, and that he has been living in a lie. So if you're looking for a story that's kind of sort of dystopian and sort of living outside the law and sort of a mystery, it has a great like semi-noir feel to it. It's not noir, but it does have some noir to it, and Jake is a totally fine main character. I think it'll scratch that itch if you're looking for something that is like Thief or Dishonored, and it's just an easy read. So the next book to talk about is Seeker of Time by J.M. Buckler, and this is about a girl who ends up moving from her previous town to a new town where she starts school, and she falls for this super hot guy at school named Cyrus, and she's got like these warm feelings all over her when she's there. And there's also like this blue-eyed weirdo who's staring in her window the second that she moves in, and she's like, what the frick is going on? Well, as the story moves forward, she still has this crush on Cyrus, but that's gonna have to stop as later in the story she finds out that they're actually twins, and the feelings that she's getting around him are, I mean, she does have crushy feelings because he is sexy, but she has like this awakening inside of her where she gets superpowers, and she learns that she's an alien from another planet, and so is Cyrus, and there was like this huge escape because somebody on that planet killed her parents and they were trying to kill her. She learns that the blue-eyed guy is like an assassin, sort of guardian sent to watch over her and to bring her back to her home planet to help her take care of the, villains that are still on that planet and get things back to normal. And I think she's going to take Cyrus with her for that too. There's a lot of focus in that book about the Spanish class. She did not like her Spanish teacher at all. I was actually expecting that book to be, I think, worse. I think it was the biggest crime was that it was mostly boring. There was so much filler in it that didn't need to happen. And it just took forever for anything to happen. But it was quite the twist that she had a crush on her twin brother. The next book to talk about is Handbook for Mortals by Lainey Sarum. And I think this made the list for Loin Stream because of the controversy around how this author made the bestseller list, because of the author buying a bunch of copies of her own book in order to rank, and then that got it more stuff. And then she had connections because even before she published, she was showing up at Comic-Cons. But, I can't shame anybody for the hustle. You do what you got to do. You do what you can do. And that is, regardless of how you feel, that is still impressive. So Handbook for Mortals was about a girl named Zaid Holder, and she ran off to basically join the circus in Las Vegas. And there are so many characters in this book because you meet like all of the techies, and you get like the two guys. One of them is a bandy sweetheart man, and the other one is, I don't even remember what he was, but he the more brooding one, and that was the one that she was obviously actually gonna go for. There was also so much filler in this book too. Like, I don't remember so much of it. It was just, there was learning how to do certain magical moves eventually later in the story for her to do a performance in Las Vegas, and at some point she like tired herself out or like took damage or something and died and had to be taken back to her family. and they had to stab her with some sort of mystical dagger during a storm in order to bring her back. And there were a couple of chapters in there that were done in like through her as a ghost, watching them watch her. And so it was like first person, third person in a really bizarre way. And funny enough, that's not the only time I've read that this last year, is I've seen that 2 or 3 times now. And it's very bizarre. One of the other books that we read was Zenith by Sasha Alberg and Lindsay Cummings. And this is a space fantasy book about a woman called the Bloody Baroness. And that's because she has killed so many people. It's just like Isla. And she runs a space pirate crew with her other lady friends and herself. And they're basically on the run from this. It opens up with them being on the run from this spaceship that is chasing them. It's a bounty hunter, and this bounty hunter was actually her ex-boyfriend, who she stranded on another planet and took their ship once they had a dispute about something. And so then he's catching up with her because somebody from another planet is missing their son, and they want her and that guy to go and get the missing son and bring him back. So the two of them have to team up together, and then you've got, lizard skin woman that her skin gets so hot that it turns on fire and can actually light things on fire. And you've also got chapters. This book was actually hard to get through because there were, so many perspectives that weren't necessary. And like half of the book is also time skipping in the past between 2 or 3 different people that don't have any weight on the current plot. It's just kind of doing flashbacks and telling you their backstories through sort of active moments, but they don't matter. And so then, since you have so many perspectives already, it just gets confusing because there is also nothing that tells you what year it is or who these people are or why they matter. And then you've got Valen in there, who is the missing kid, and you've got a bunch of random chapters by him that are just like about misery and painting. That's all that his character personality is misery and painting. Because, I mean, fair to be miserable because he's been tortured for like 3 years. But also, it didn't add anything to the story. I think the story could have been stronger in general if the author had stuck to Andy's perspective and then maybe Noor's perspective. I think she's the big baddie. And just had that clash of like the past and the present and how the two of them made decisions that were similar, put in similar situations, but then they made different decisions that then led them to be at different parts of their lives. And at one point, then you intersect with them actually meeting each other in the future. With the fact that it kept switching all of these perspectives between all of the secondary characters, and then between 2 or 3 characters in the past, and then between not just secondary characters, but third and fourth-ary characters. It was just a lot, and it was slow, and it was one of the few books this year that we've read on Loinstream that was actually a slog. And I say that when I've already talked about Seeker of Time and Handbook for Mortals, which were both sloggy. The next book that I'm going to mention is Supermarket by Bobby Hall. That was a more recent Loin read, and that is about a man named Flynn who is a writer. He's having writer's block. He's kind of failed at everything in his life. So he gets this job at a supermarket in order to help him finish writing this manuscript because this guy, Edward Norton, yes, you heard that right, in New York, has offered him a publishing deal for this book he hasn't yet written. And so now Flynn is working at this place, and he meets this eccentric guy, Frank, who doesn't care about the rules, keeps a gun in his locker, and knows a heck of a ton of things about banana. He knows all of the banana facts. You got questions about potassium? He's got those numbers. We could have used more banana ranting in that story. It turns out as we go that this book was very, very inspired by Fight Club, and from that you can guess that Frank was not a real person. He was just a figment of Flynn's imagination that was created in order to help him finish this book. And then about halfway through the book, Flynn robs the supermarket that he's working at while he's writing the book about Frank, because he thinks that he is writing a book, or it presents it that he's writing a book, but he's actually robbing the store. And then he goes to an insane asylum where his girlfriend, his new girlfriend, the girl who worked at the grocery store, is trying to help him out from being crazy. And then she actually helps him escape the asylum. Also, his dog wasn't real. There was like so much in this book. You could guess that the dog wasn't real because his neighbors were looking at him like he was a freak when he went walking his dog, which was just an empty leash, and when he put a picture up of the dog, which was just a picture of him. Yeah, it was a trip. It was an entertaining trip, but it was a trip. Do I recommend it if you want to go for a trip? Because I think that story doesn't end with a very satisfying ending, because you're like, oh, is this the end or is it not the end? The next book to talk about is Marked, which is the first House of Night book by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. This was apparently big in, what was it, the late 90s, early 2000s, and there are a lot of books in the Marked series. I had never heard of it before. And this is about a girl named Zoe who finds out that she's a vampire, or ends up getting turned into a vampire. She gets marked at school, and then she gets to go off to the school for vampires, where she learns, about equestrian studies and vampire history. And it's more funny because when we were reading this, we turned it all into Russian references. And so she wasn't learning how to ride horses. She was riding bears, and they worshipped Karl Marx, not a goddess. And Vladimir Putin was her mentor, and replacing capitalist with Ukrainians. It was a good time. But this book had the unfortunate thing of calling it vampires when it actually meant that they were witches, because the whole thing had to do with witches, which is also kind of what's happening in the current Loinstream read, Library of the Dead, where it says that it's ghosts. They're practicing witchcraft, and so it is kind of a misdirect. I don't even know if I can say anything much more about Marked, because it was just she gets picked by the mean girls, and then she gets all of the elements, because of course she gets all of the elements, and her best friend's group is appropriately diverse with every racial category and a gay guy, just to make sure that it is all settled just fine. I don't know what happens with the rest of the series. Clearly she becomes the next czar of Russia land before the end of the book. I mean, if she's got all 4 or 5 elements, she's cutting your power if you're not paying her the rubles. So another book that I read that was not part of any Loinstream was Tower of Dogs by H.H. Miller. H.H. Miller is actually a YouTuber here on YouTube who goes by Halo Studios. She is doing Create-a-thon all of September, so if you want anything to actually help you be more creative, head over to her channel and be a part of that. She hosts creative live streams for sprints and things on Mondays with co-host Q. And so Tower of Dogs is another book that's very anime-y inspired, or felt very anime to me. It's about a brother and sister named Rome and Sparrow, and they are trying to escape where they're currently at because it's too dangerous. It's the city that they're in is too dangerous, and they're going to jump on this train to get out of the city and go somewhere safer. However, they get separated when Sparrow ends up on the train and Rome is not on the train, and the train kind of shoots out. So then Sparrow ends up in the center of this town, or this walled off city called Eden, and ends up being kind of a servant girl, or kind of a maiden to this really rich family with a girl that has some developmental issues or has been scarred, and she can't communicate necessarily like everybody else and has difficulties, but she becomes a really good friend as she waits around for Rome to catch up. And then the whole book is Rome trying to get into the city. Rome also discovers that he has special abilities during this time period, and he is working his way into being reunited somehow, but he has a long way to go to get to where Sparrow is, and there are a lot of things in the way, such as the walls and the guarding around Eden, and all of the groups that are in the woods, and all of the animals and creatures that are in the woods that are not normal animals and creatures. Again, this book feels a lot like an anime, because there are a lot of slice of life things that happen in this book that are specific to the universe, and there is a lot of relationship building, especially when you go with, on Rome's side, you've got him and his crew of men and his brotherhood that he's working on, and then he gets a mentor at some point in there. And then with Sparrow, she's just waiting for Rome to show up. So there's not really an active plot. I mean, there's Rome trying to get to Sparrow, but that's like the most active motivation that there is. And so then every other chapter that is Sparrow is kind of just being with Sparrow. And so if that's kind of your vibe and you kind of just want to hang out, that might be a good book for you. The second book is already out, and it's called Den of Sparrows, and the third book is coming out in October, and it is called Grave of Brothers. And so keep an eye out for that if you are looking for a fantasy series. I think she is planning to extend it a lot more. The next book that I'm going to talk about, again, and not a Loinstream read, it was just something to read to be like, people were talking about it, so why not? It's called Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. It was supposed to be like a horror novella, but again, it was just a disappointment. What is it about? It's about this group of bougie friends. Well, I don't know if they're all bougie. I guess they're not all bougie, but they're bougie enough that Philip pays for them to all go to Japan so the other friend can get married in this haunted Japanese building. And so then Black Teeth Ghost kind of attacks, and none of the characters matter because they are all jerks. They're literally all the same person, except for Philip, who is a rich white man who is just there for them to all like mooch off of and then hate on, and then they kill him and bury him at the end in order to escape the ghost for the thing that, like, why? I understand liking abandoned places because I think abandoned places are interesting. I think abandoned places are full of history and even art, and people leave their touch everywhere they go. But like, also, why are you having your friend fly you all the way to Japan for you to get married? And how are you jerks to him still? Like, that is just justice for Philip. He was abused. There was nothing special about this story except for some of the like really bizarre descriptions that the author decided to use as metaphors and similes. But it was not a pleasant experience in any way. And that's not even saying it because it was horror. Like, it was just, it felt like one of the most pretentious attempts at rewriting a ghost story, and it felt like an MFA project, for real. And I can say that because I have an MFA. I can tell you my MFA project was not that pretentious. The 13th book that I'm going to talk about now is one that I'm actually currently still reading. I'm about 70% of the way through it, but I should be finishing it by the time this video goes up. I don't need the details on how it ends in order to tell you about it, but it is called People Who Eat Darkness, the true story of a young woman who vanished from the streets of Tokyo and the evil that swallowed her up, by Richard Lloyd Parry. This is about the serial rapist and killer Joji Obara, who lived in Japan and was active during like I think the late 1970s through the 1990s. And he was kind of picking off girls that were part of hostess clubs. He would like ask them out for a dohan, and then he would take them back to his seaside mansion or apartment, get them drugged, then have sex with them for 12 hours straight and camera it. And he had like 400 videotapes in his house of various assaults when he was arrested. And so this book is actually a nonfiction true crime about his crimes and about his life, and not just his life, but it's also got the lives of Lucy Blackburn and some of the other victims that were part of this case. And this book really does do a lot more focus on the victims and the victims' families and the perspective of the police and of the newspaper from the outside, as opposed to being like a case study or a biography about Joji Obara himself. And so it's a little more slow and it's a little more jumping around. So if you're looking for a profile on the criminal, this is not the book to go to. If you kind of want like a bird's eye view that is very, very feeling like a journalist talking about all of the surrounding factors, then this is a good book for that. But for me, it's been a little... It's like just a meh read for me because it's not really what I was looking at. I was looking for an in-depth study of personality and character and background. But that said, there's been a lot of interesting background about culture and the clash between the Koreans and the Japanese, because Joji Obara is actually Korean, and he changed his name a couple of times in order to fit in and then to whatever it was that he was doing. His father was also allegedly involved with the crime syndicate in Japan, and he had a lot of money during the 80s and the 90s. He had so much money. His dad also died when he was like 18 or 19, and he inherited millions of dollars. By the time he was in his 20s, he had like $43 million. He had that much money to just... And so he was serial dating hostesses and all of that. It is a truly interesting case if you want to look into it. I just don't think that this is the best way that I've seen it presented. It's just kind of slow. And the author describes the book as a nonfiction, a thriller, a courtroom drama, and a biography of both the victims and killers. So that's more how you can look at it if you're looking into it. It is very much all over the spectrum of stuff that's in it. The final book on this list, and I can't believe that you guys made us read it as the 100th episode of the Loin Stream. It was Troll, the first 3 books by Emma Clark. That's a book about a girl who was on dating websites looking for a partner when she was getting trolled by this dude who was just being a complete jerk. Well, eventually, that jerk stalks her back to her house, and then he does what you would expect him to do. And it turns out that this is some sort of political thing going on because her dad is like a Fed, and that guy was trying to get to her dad, and there's a shootout at the end, and it escalates. Like, you've got a couple of random chapters that are literally just smut, and it's really awkward, and then you've suddenly got political intrigue being inserted in like the last chapter or 2 of the book, which with this book, it's not the complete thing. It's the first 3 books, which is still a novella, but it still cuts it off just as Justin is running off, and so it's open-ended because there are like 2 more parts to this book to finish off the idea. And I mean, it's awkward. There were awkward parts, and I still can't believe you guys made me read it. So that's where we are. The sexy internet troll. So those were a bunch of books that I have read recently. There's a great list of books here to read if you're looking for a variety of different things. You know, you've got the ridiculous, you've got the anime vibes. If you're looking for a new series that is going to be finished next month, you have that going on in there, or Marked, which is already finished if you're looking for the magical stuff. And so there's a lot of variety. You could say a lot of things about my reading list. You cannot say that it is not drastically varied. So there is that. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like these kinds of videos in addition to some of the longer ones, because I'm not going to stop doing the longer ones, but I did want to be able to share more stuff, and hopefully in the future, as I decide to do things like this, I'll write myself more notes so I can remember more about each of the books. But I'm not going to be done with the long form, so don't worry about that. With that said, thank you so. I just wanted to get to be able to read more indie books because I have so many on my list. So hopefully that's coming. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?